Here's some big breaking news coming in. Explosive new facts about the Tawang clash between India and China. Exclusive scoop that India Today gathers on the Indian Army's response. Chinese troops chased, thrashed, overpowered. Indian troops have chased the Chinese troops, in some capturing a handful of them as well. Unnerved and under threat of being overwhelmed, we hear the Chinese troops fired warning shots in the air and literally ran back to save their lives. Shiv Arur joining us live for a little more on this. Shiv, this inside scoop that India Today has accessed speaks extensively on how Chinese troops were overpowered. Lucky that India had all 3 units of the army present right there, showing India's might. Do give us a little more on what happened.
Nabila, first, a very serious disclaimer. What has happened in Tawang is an extremely serious issue. It is not, meant to be the subject matter of any kind of jingoism or chest thumping, because this is a real life and death situation for Indian troops, deployed in that area. So I don't want to, over sentimentalize what has happened. This is a brawl that took a very, very ugly turn. There have been many brawls in that area as well. So the safety of Indian troops has to be absolutely paramount. Now that we have out of the way, let's share with our viewers a few more very, very crucial details that have not come out so far, in this December 9th clash that took place. Now, we've reported already that it was a clash, that there were injuries on both sides. At least 9 Indian soldiers were injured, about 22 Chinese soldiers were injured. Now we actually know why, there is that, what exactly happened once the clash began. The clash lasted for about 25 to 30 minutes is what we're told, Nabila. But the numbers, the Chinese that had come there in numbers, did not expect that they would be outnumbered by an Indian side, which was actually preempting their arrival. The Indian side had pre-deployed, they had advanced intelligence about the possibility of such an intrusion and an attack by the Chinese side from that particular post in Yangtze. So they had pre-deployed on certain ridge lines, and when the Chinese came in, they were attacked almost immediately. There was verbal abuse initially between the two sides, which quickly escalated into stone pelting, and then there were fisticuffs. A lot of hand-to-hand combat between both sides, which lasted for quite a while. But the interesting, piece of information that we are now breaking is that the Chinese side was completely overwhelmed. This was nothing like Galwan. In fact, this was just the opposite. The Chinese side was completely overwhelmed. I'm talking overwhelmed in terms of numbers, and they were practically chased back. It soon dawned on them that there was no possibility of them remaining in that area and, maybe possibly even living to tell the tale. And they were literally chased back, towards their side. Remember, there's no demarcated line there, so we need to be careful to say their side, our side, because, this is one area which is disputed. But the fact that they were chased back towards their post, and so under threat was that post and the Chinese soldiers, that they actually fired some warning shots with firearms, because they probably felt that the post would have been under threat, by the Indian side as well. We need to be careful about the facts as well, about where the Indian side was. But Indian troops, I am told by my sources in Arunachal Pradesh, that they were really aggressive. They beat back the Chinese intruders, so much so that they went pretty much across onto their side as well. During the skirmish, the Indian side also, while the Chinese were retreating, they also took hold of 5 or 6 of these Chinese soldiers who were trying to retreat. These were the ones who had indulged in some of that violence and kept them for a couple of hours, and then they were sent back as well. They used loudspeakers. The Indian side went on to the Chinese side. They stood their ground over there. Very, very aggressive. There were at least 2 army regiments. I'm not going to name which units were involved, but they were there. Very aggressive posturing from the Indian side. They used loudspeakers. Both sides used loudspeakers, and they basically sort of communicated with each other in a very hostile, aggressive manner for a couple of hours. And then finally, when things had cooled down just a little bit, the Indian side then cooled things down and then retreated back towards the Indian side and the Indian post. So it was sending out a very, very aggressive warning to the Chinese side through that loudspeaker and by being overwhelmed. that do not try such misadventures. We know what you're trying to do, and this is the kind of response you will receive. That's what happened, Nabila.
Shiv, wow, from what we hear, clearly Indian side was mighty prepared, literally chased off the Chinese troops, and we hear warning shots were fired. Would you be able to elaborate for us what exactly do warning shots signify?
The warning shots basically signifies that the Chinese post, felt so vulnerable and was so unnerved by this large number of Indian troops that were, seen to be moving towards them in an aggressive manner, that they fired warning shots, possibly suspecting or possibly feeling threatened by the numbers that they saw. Remember, this is a familiar sight. The Indian side had seen something very similar in Galwan. This time, not in the same kinds of numbers, but it looks like there was a bit of a role reversal this time, Nabila, where the Chinese side was a little smaller, it felt a little vulnerable, and there were much larger, well-prepared numbers of Indians. The difference here, of course, is in both cases, both in Galwan as well as in Yangtze, the treachery, the violation of protocol was by one side, that is the Chinese side. They were trying to create facts on the ground. They were trying to violate the line of actual control. So the warning shots that they fired from their post, their actual military post, was basically to say, don't come any nearer. You're approaching our post, which is not allowed, so don't come any nearer. We are armed and ready for you. So that's a kind of military message that they were sending out to say don't come any nearer. Remember, firearms are not supposed to be used during patrols, but clearly this was something that had escalated. The Chinese had been overwhelmed. They were unnerved by the brute strength, if I can use that phrase, of the Indian response. The Indian side did not wait. That's another piece of information that we have here, Nabila, is that the Indian side did not wait for things to escalate beyond a point. The first red line that was crossed, the stone pelting, elicited and triggered an immediate vicious response from the Indian side. And I imagine that's one of the reasons why during the Chinese retreat, the Indian side, sort of bit very hard into that situation. They captured some of them. They went on to the Chinese side, possibly, put that Chinese post under threat in some manner. We don't know what distance they were standing at. And that very, very aggressive message was sent out. So it's a very no-nonsense kind of operation. Unfortunately, some Indian soldiers, sustained some minor injuries in the skirmish. One of them, I'm told, has sustained a wrist fracture as well and is being treated in Guwahati. But apart from that, the Indian side definitely sending out a very, very aggressive message about don't mess with us.